Ken Fisher from Fisher Investments. Ken, thank you for your time. Now, Trump was on a roll this week. Tariffs were put in place on Canada, Mexico and China. And overnight, the US president said he will announce reciprocal tariffs on further countries this coming week, fueling further escalation in this trade war. So how do you see this affecting the economy across the United States and globally? And what will the ripple effects be long term?
Well, first, thanks for having me on, Hortense. I appreciate it. Secondly, this is a great question. And the way you asked it is the right context. But simply, all of this has less economic impact than most people think it does, less than most people expect. And the reason for that is simply that as per what President Trump did with Mexico and Canada, what he normally does, not always, but normally and mostly, is to announce things like tariffs, then use that as a negotiation ploy, make some kind of a deal on something else that he wants, and then relieve the tariffs. But even when that's not the case, tariffs have less impact than people think because for the most part, and this is particularly true for Australia, if you think about what Australia exports, it's mostly commodities like energy, metals, meat, what have you. And you ship that to some other country that Trump hasn't impacted tariffs onto ships to America. A lot of this gets repackaged and for a brokerage fee and a little water transport, which is cheap, moves from one country to another. You could see that all throughout the tariffs that Trump applied in his first term. This will be, it's not good, it's a negative, but mostly it's a negotiation ploy for something else. And when it's not, it has less economic impact than people think.
Trump was also signing executive orders this week banning transgender people from women's sport and also banning paper straws, returning back to plastic. That's reversing the Biden administration's initiative because he says they simply don't work. So what do you think he's got next in the pipelines?
So, I'm not really sure. The reality of all of these things, how do you say this? The way I would say it is it's very hard to determine often what the real intent is. What appears to be the move is often a false move that throws people off. I would not read too much into these things. People are way oversensitive right now and way overreactive. This is really not a bad time because there's too much fear of all of these things, too much belief that it's all negative. For the most part, when you look around the world and measure sentiment, people are more pessimistic than they should be relative to the reality that we confront.
Yes, that is true. Now, additionally, a few days ago, Trump's press secretary said that the president would be taking over Gaza. Now, this was met with extremely mixed reactions. And the leaders, their top officials now, have said they've walked back on the idea. Now, can you give us an insight as to what could have gone on behind the scenes there?
So first, if we recall when that happened, that was when Netanyahu was in Washington, D.C., visiting the president. Secondarily, I don't think anyone ever really knows what goes on in the president's head. What I like to say about that is I have no clue what goes on in his head other than that Big Macs go into it and Whoppers come out of it. And in that, when you think about the Whoppers, a lot of these things are to get you to focus on this extreme thing so that when he does something that otherwise might be extreme, but a lot less so, it seems like it's pretty not so extreme. He's just really good at playing that game. And he's been you said he's on a roll this week. He's been on a roll from the day he took office in a blur and whirl of activity. I was in Washington, D.C. yesterday, meeting with members of Congress. And the fact of the matter is, it's a blur to all of them. That the reality is, we all know that he's not going to take over Gaza. But the reality of what he will probably do is provide heavy support to Israel.
Ken Fisher, an absolute pleasure speaking to you this morning. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.